basically got this much in U.S. gold reserves. That's how much we held in deep storage. But man, oh man, that started in 1914. There are the gold reserves. Well, let's see. Have we heard about fractional reserve banking on a 10-to-1 ratio? There it is, my friends. There it is. And I'm going to go back just so you can see. Can you see that blurry 10 there? That's why I made it a little bit more clear. We'll probably get the graphic artist on this so that it's even more clear. But this area, all in here, were corporate bonds, so corporate debt, that were then converted into Federal Reserve notes on a 10-to-1 ratio. That is what private commercial debt monetized at Federal Reserve notes and checking accounts, which checking accounts are also had the Federal Reserve notes. I don't know if any of you listened to or read the speech or an article on the speech by Michael Barr, who is part of the FOMC, so he's part of the Federal Reserve Board. And the reason why I got so excited about this, honestly, is because he was comparing 3 previous crises. And it is so telling what he chose. Number 1, he chose the Great Depression, which was the kickoff. Number 2, he was talking about the 1980s savings and loan crisis, which was the middle-aged. And then he was talking about the great financial crisis, which was endgame. And the reason why you hear me talk about it like that, because I'm always talking about the life cycle of a fiat money. And that is exactly, without him even knowing it, that is exactly what he was talking about. Now, we are having some technical difficulties, but when I read that article and I read his speech, I became obsessed, and I had to show you how pretty much every darn thing he was saying was wrong.
In a recent speech, Federal Reserve Vice Chair Michael Barr referenced 3 key financial crises: the Great Depression, the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s, and the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. While intended to reassure the public, his comparisons unintentionally exposed the fragile life cycle of fiat currency. His narrative focused on regulation as a solution, but failed to acknowledge the underlying systemic decay that unites these crises. Instead of offering clarity, Barr's words mirror a larger pattern where central banks unintentionally reveal the deep flaws in our monetary system. This speech wasn't just informative, it was a red flag.
It was wrong. And I can't say that he was lying because I don't think he knows the difference. I think that the central banks and the central planners have absolutely convinced themselves, because that's the only way you can be a really good liar. First, you start by lying to yourself. And once you are thoroughly convinced of that lie, nothing else matters. So he was talking about how regulation creates these booms and these busts. Now, I want you to know that I've already put together a 42-slide PowerPoint on this. So we are going to be recording it, but it is so important because in this PowerPoint, I'm countering everything. But you know why I got so darn excited? Because as I'm doing my work, a lot of times something will just pop up and I'm focused over here, so I know I don't really have time to look at this over here yet, but I can get a sense of how important it is. So I will grab it, and you know, I always grab all the links anyway. And I put it over here because I am working on a book. And I knew that this was a piece that needed to be in the book. But I probably found this piece, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 months ago. It's been a little while. When Michael Barr came out and started talking about these 3 instances and talking about how it was the regulations that would protect you, well, I don't know. Those things were regulated and they didn't protect. It was gold and silver in the system that created limitations that actually protect you. And once they moved away from that, they being the central banks and the governments, then they need the rules of the road that will keep them in control. But in here, and we're having a little, I'm going to see if I can do it. Is this tied up? Can this be tied up to you? And do you think I can show it? Are we up and running on that one? Okay. Both of the laptops that I have in here decided to malfunction. That's why we were like a little bit late in coming on. And I'm not going to show you all of these because we need to take a minute of time to, oh, okay. Well, it's okay if it's like in front of me for a moment. Excuse me for a second. Let me get that.
Each of the crises Barr highlighted represents a stage in fiat money's life cycle, its birth, maturity, and impending collapse. During the Great Depression, the U.S. left the gold standard. In the 1980s, systemic cracks widened with reckless lending. By 2008, the system was on life support, requiring unprecedented bailouts. These weren't just regulatory failures, they were symptoms of a currency system that loses value over time. Central banks argue they can manage these cycles, but the truth is, without the discipline of sound money like gold or silver, the system inevitably spirals into instability and inflation.
Get this up there. Oh, that's not the right. And we could talk about that too, but that's actually not what I'm looking for. I'm sorry about this. See, it's live, and live, anything can happen. And it does. It frequently does. Okay, so if you could set it up on the screen, that would be great. Because there's just a few things that I really would like to show you. And of course, I want to remind you of this because they always want you to think that this time is different, and it never, ever, ever is different. It may not be exactly alike because, of course, technology advances. But Thomas Jefferson, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, we talk about this all the time, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent that they conquered. And, you know, we all know the World Economic Forum prediction, by 2030, you will own nothing. And so what I really want you to understand as we look at this a little bit, believe me, I'm going into this like deep, and I want this video that we create from it to be really, really powerful so that you can see the truth.
Barr emphasized that regulation can prevent booms and busts, but history proves otherwise. Each crisis he cited occurred under heavily regulated environments, yet they still happened. The central issue isn't a lack of oversight, it's the ease with which money is created out of thin air. Central banks and financial institutions often believe their own myths. Once you convince yourself a lie is truth, it becomes easier to sell it to the public. Regulation becomes a smokescreen to justify manipulation, while ordinary people pay the price in lost savings and diminished purchasing power.
We have got to get sound money back in the system again. It is the only way to level this playing field. So here we go. Is that showing? Because I don't see it there, and it's okay as long. Okay, perfect. Okay. So this was a speech. He just did it on July 16th and tied to weakened bank rules. Well, yeah, and also to this, because this is what creates the winners and the losers. Duh. And the cheaper and easier it is to create money, the more money that it is that will be created. And the easier it is to spend that money, the more money will be spent. So again, he's talking about these three crises. I'm going through this kind of fast because this is where I want to start with you. And I'm just going to do this quickly. Just come back when this is finished. Come back. Because what you're looking at here is the start of the system where they had the kickoff and created all that new money inside of this system. It is relevant today because banks have, or central bank have used corporations, so banks and other corporations, these are private corporations, to justify and create this. So let me show you this. I mean, I just lost my mind basically when I saw this. And I know that it's fuzzy and it's horrible to see. It comes from, and I don't really have, if I can do a pointer on this.
Before fiat dominance, gold and silver anchored the monetary system, setting natural limits on debt and inflation. But when governments abandoned gold, they replaced those constraints with ever-expanding credit. A Federal Reserve graphic shows how corporate debt was monetized and converted into money at a 10-to-1 ratio starting in 1914, essentially the kickoff of modern fiat. This fractional reserve model allowed banks to lend far more than they held in gold, laying the groundwork for today's unstable system. Without gold's limits, money creation became effortless and dangerous.
Now, I'm going to do it by this. Okay, here we go. I can do this, right? This right here, that little itty bitty area is what you're going to be looking at. This black area in here are gold reserves. You can see there's a little shift here. That's in 33, and I'm coming back to that, well, when we do the whole thing. But this is the kickoff. So this is what I'm going to show you, this teeny weeny area here. These are the gold, the U.S. gold reserves. This area in here, this gray area, are corporate bonds that have been converted into fiat, into Federal Reserve notes, into this. Okay, so let's just, all right, so now let me explain this area a little bit better. Remember I showed you that little dark area? Well, here it is. There's that little dark area.
With the rise of stablecoins and digital assets, we're witnessing a new chapter. Private corporations are now positioned to issue currency, just as banks did in the early fiat era. The recently passed Genius Act will allow easier cross-border payments using tokenized corporate debt. While this seems like progress, it may accelerate hyperinflation. When money can be created at the push of a button without cost or accountability, its value diminishes rapidly. This isn't innovation, it's monetized control disguised as convenience. Sound money is disappearing, and digital centralization is taking its place.
And it's basically got this much in U.S. gold reserves. That's how much we held in deep storage. But man, oh man, that started in 1914. There are the gold reserves. Well, let's see. Have we heard about fractional reserve banking on a 10-to-1 ratio? There it is, my friends. There it is. And I'm going to go back just so you can see. Can you see that blurry 10 there? That's why I made it a little bit more clear. We'll probably get the graphic artist on this so that it's even more clear. But this area, all in here, were corporate bonds, so corporate debt, that were then converted into Federal Reserve notes on a 10-to-1 ratio. That is what private commercial debt monetized at Federal Reserve notes and checking accounts, which checking accounts are also had the Federal Reserve notes. That was the kickoff to this system. Now, what just happened recently with the Genius Act? The corporations will be issuing those stable coins. They are kicking this off. And while it took them a while and they still haven't been able to comply with the Basel III rules, which, by the way, the video will be out this week on that. I didn't push it because for me, deregulation, I don't think it's ever actually going to go into place.
Ultimately, the easier it is to create money, the less value it holds. Inflation isn't just rising prices, it's the slow theft of your savings. Central banks know this, but they prioritize control over stability. As Jefferson warned, Private banking powers can deprive the people of everything. By 2030, globalists predict you will own nothing, a chilling echo of history's lessons. The only way to stop this spiral is by reinstating sound money backed by tangible assets. Gold and silver aren't relics, they're safeguards. Without them, every new solution is just another step toward collapse.
But hey, the banks have not been able to implement much more than, the bail-in laws since 2010. But look at what they did here. Lickety-split, bam, the banks and all these corporations were ready to issue stablecoins. So they get ready for what they want, and they don't. They lag behind, and then they go in to change the rules, which is what's happening now, and the deregulation. But what's critical to me and why I got so excited, there's your proof. This comes from the Federal Reserve. This is not me saying it. It isn't my words saying it. But what happened was that 50% loss of purchasing power. Because the easier and cheaper it is to make money, the more money will be made. This Genius Act that they just legalized, they're so excited about how much cheaper and easier it's going to be to transition that money and transfer it from one place to another, cross-border. Oh, this payment system. Really? What do you think that's going to do to the money? I personally believe that is what will usher in the visible hyperinflation. Because the easier it is to create money, the more money will be created. And quite honestly, it costs them nothing. Wish that happened to them. It costs them nothing to create this. Nothing. I've shown you that. Nothing. And it costs even less for one person to push a button and create as many trillions of dollars as they want to. And that looks good for a minute because, wow, there's that new artificial market for dollars. But what does that do to the ones that you work for, that you try and save, that you have to buy your children's food with? They have less and less until absolutely zero value.